Hi, Cilla. It's so great to see you again.
Hi, Nancy. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, you and I have done interviews in the past. We've had conversations a lot about the immune function of the body, how the immune system is supposed to work. And it's interesting because I've been in practice almost 30 years. And when I first started, I had had the opportunity to see Barbara Loe Fisher speak. I literally had been graduated about a month, and I saw her speak about her journey with her son and how she started the National Vaccine Information Center. So, coming from a chiropractic background where we talk about the body's ability to heal itself, I had a good foundation, and I would educate people one-on-one in my office, and then I started doing talks, and I would see people, the people I saw that seemed to have the most health problems were those that either took medication all the time, or maybe they had taken vaccines, and it's like their whole immune system was compromised. And I just did not see that in people who weren't doing all that. And I have to tell you, my own personal story real quick is first 29 years of my life, I was sick all the time. And then I started getting chiropractic care. I got off all my meds and I became healthier than I had been my entire life. So I was kind of like this living, walking example of that. But I just feel like now, in this day and age, it seems like people just rely so much on medication. And in my opinion, it's setting up this vicious cycle that's making people more unhealthy because they're not allowing the body to do its own thing. So, I'm like wondering also, what's your experience been? Because you've been a homeopath for quite a long time.
25 years, about 25 years. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I'm a big fan of chiropractic because it's one of the most natural modalities. You're simply opening up the body for energy to flow through the body, right? And
Right.
energy is health, movement is health. And I've seen a big shift, Nancy, because after they allowed direct marketing of pharmaceutical ads on TV, that's when an enormous shift took place. We're one of two countries, New Zealand and the US, that legally allows these advertisements to happen on TV. And they're devastating because they give people the impression that any symptom you have needs to be stopped. And the reality is, symptoms are our body's form of expression, and they're necessary, and they're not bad, and they're not to be avoided or suppressed or stopped. They're to be understood, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I see a lot of the young moms coming in to see me who freak out at the least fever or a discharge or a rash. And these are the natural components of externalizing toxins and really bringing us to greater levels of health.
And,
So,
and if you think about it, why do so many people get sick this time of year? Right? They call it flu season or cold season, but the truth is people consume more sugar this time of the year. And if you live in the northern part of the country, you're not exposed to vitamin D as much naturally. You're not getting out in the sun. Like here today, it's a dreary day, another dreary day. We may have two nice days during the week where I live. So people aren't getting that natural vitamin D. And we're trained to believe, especially like if you watch any kind of major network for news, I should say news like this, right? It's news. It's really entertainment, is that, you know, because they allow direct to consumer advertising, they're kind of beholden to pharma to push this narrative because
absolutely. Yeah, they've
they're,
changed the narrative. They've
yeah,
changed the public perception. advertising is a way to psychologically influence individuals. And let's add to your list vitamin D, sugar, the dreary weather, and emotional stress.
Right.
Because we underestimate how much our psyche affects our health. It really does manage our health. And what's Ram Dass say? If you think you're spiritually evolved, go visit your relatives, go visit your family. Right? And people are, visiting family. There's the stressors of the season. It's enormous. And then you've got, this voice in your ears saying you need to take this or do that in order to be healthy. And really, it's very basic.
Yeah, and along with that idea, the emotional, because we know that if you're depressed, you're going to be more compromised in your immune system. Well, because the weather's dreary, you're not getting out and exercise, and
Right.
maybe you're going to the gym, which is not the same as being out in nature and getting grounded and taking a break from technology. I don't know about you, but the gym near me, every now and then I try to go. I won't say which one it is, but the whole wall is blasted with TVs, and even though you have to use your earbuds to listen to it, doesn't matter. You're just getting all this sensory overload between all the people and sweat, smelly, and just like all this EMF, right? So trying to get exercise and be outdoors, again, being outdoors, right? That's how we commune with nature and get energized and recharged. It's really tough this time of the year, and all those things play a part.
Right. And what most new mothers don't understand is that children get 8 to 10 viruses a year, and some of them pass through very quickly, 24 hours. And when you and I were kids and in school, I didn't have kids that were autistic. I didn't have kids having asthma or peanut allergies or all of these chronic diseases that we now see. And mothers have become very frightened about natural illness. Can I share a little chart with
Please.
you?
Yes, please do.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, here's my screen. All right. So this little circle represents, at the top, here we have exposure to something out in public. Kids are in school, other kids have runny noses, or they're sneezing, or they have colds. So you have some exposure. And then what happens going around the left is a prodromal period. And that's when we know something's not quite right, but there's no symptoms yet. Maybe your child is cranky or clingy or doesn't want to sleep alone, and you feel like they're just not on their game right now. Then they might get a chill. So all of a sudden they're bundled up on the couch, and this is a natural precursor to the fever that's starting to develop within their system. And this fever causes a shift in their internal economy, we can call it. Okay, what's mastering everything from the inside. And then they're going to start natural antibody production to fight against whatever this invader is in their system. And they begin to build up a discharge. So a discharge can move into an eruption of either a runny nose, a cough, maybe vomiting, maybe diarrhea, all the ways in which we expel toxins in our body. And then next will come a sweat. So that night they might soak their pajamas and the bed, and that sweat is kind of the end of their body clearing things out, and they come to resolution. And now they have lifelong immunity to that particular virus that they picked up, a cold or whatever it is. And they've added that to their stores of immune resilience. And this can take place, this entire process, in as short as 24 hours. And parents will say they weren't quite right. Oh, they were flushed. Oh, they had a runny nose. Oh, they had a bad night where they woke up crying last night and they were sweaty and wet, and they've resolved a virus. Or it can last longer. where they spend 2 days where they're vomiting, they have a high fever or diarrhea, or maybe a cough and a cold. So it's completely normal, not to be feared, and it simply exercises our own immune system in order to have more vitality.
Right. And what we do, as the collective we, is we run out and we get some fever reducers.
Right,
And of course, we know that the fever is our body's trying to kill off, right, the
right.
virus or bacteria.
And
So,
reset our gut as
right,
well.
right.
So if you
So,
stop this process anywhere in here, you stop it. Let's say you give something to stop the fever, and now we know even mainstream media has said that Tylenol in children is not a beneficial thing. So you stop this process anywhere, and all you've done is elongated the process, driven it deeper into the system.
right. And I remember as a kid, or, up until the age of 29, when I started getting chiropractic care, I had a cold would last 2 weeks, right? That was,
Right,
typical 2 weeks. And there was an old joke, it's going to last 2 weeks, whether you take something or not.
right,
So
right,
I was always trained, have the cold remedy out, and, the over the counter stuff, and have the cough syrup. And I didn't understand that
right,
coughing and sneezing was one of the ways, the discharge of how
right.
our body's like wrapping up the virus or bacteria
Yeah.
to expel it.
So also let's address chiropractic. Where does chiropractic fit into this process, right? So your child comes home from school, they're miserable, they start having a fever, and now maybe they start tugging on their ear, right? So you suspect, oh, they may have an ear infection, which can happen after a child is very mucousy and they've had this snotty cold for a while. Their eustachian tubes are small, they can back up, and they can have an ear infection. So you take them to the chiropractor. The chiropractor adjusts them. And I used to teach at a community college where I had a chiropractor come in and talk about upper respiratory infections and what she would do when the child came in to her. So you can support in that way. You can support with homeopathy, which is my specialty. You can support with TLC. You let them stay home from school. You give them chicken soup. You sit and read books. You know what I mean? It's really a process that we've lost in our modern society, where you want to stop every symptom instantly, so you have to give a drug.
Right, right. And even just that whole idea of going inward, right? The winter is a time to go inward and reflect, and not,
Right.
live this crazy life. But in our modern society, modern,
Yeah. We never stop going.
yeah, people just keep up the same routine. And,
Right.
there's a reason why there is more illness this time of the year, because, I think it's just people are just trained to just keep going, 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 rather than doing that reset. And that's what's leading them to have these chronic illnesses. And the funny thing is if you, and it's not really funny, but it's ironic, let's put it that way, is if you read the labels of these products, they list many times all these side effects. And I don't know how many people are really reading the label.
Or they've become desensitized to it. On TV, when they talk about a drug, they have a long list, vomiting, disability, or death at the end. People ignore it because they've heard it so many times, they're familiar with it.
Yeah. And they're frustrated and they want to feel better. And I get it. That was me for 29 years. I had, like, if you had opened my medicine cabinet, I had like a pill of every color for every ill. And now, I don't even have a medicine cabinet. It's an homeopathy herbal cabinet or
Right,
vitamin. I don't
right, right.
even have a medicine in my house. I have honey for cough, and, so, and then the other thing is this time of the year, because we're eating more inflammatory foods or inflaming the gut, that can also lead to yeast production and things that we know will decrease our body's natural immune system. So
Right.
it's all these pieces. And I know that you're pretty involved with the West St. Price Foundation, or I know you've
Yeah,
been
I've
invited to
spoken for them.
speak.
I've written for their magazine. I have tremendous respect for the Weston A. Price Foundation and the work that they do and the philosophy. And there are many different philosophies about diet. And people come to me all the time and say, I'm confused. I don't know which one to follow. And it's a big issue because people must understand what their body needs. They're all
Right.
good methods, but they've got to decide what they need and not just follow a method.
And my point of bringing up Weston Price Foundation is that they're really focused on eating whole foods rather than
Right,
processed foods, because most of those, if you read the labels, there's sugar in pretty much everything.
right.
And it's fine because we have a couple Whole Foods markets near us, and one was right next to my office. I used to pop in there all the time, get some sushi, whatever. And I would look at um, their hot food buffet, where you can get the to-go prepared foods, and almost every one of them had sugar in them.
Interesting.
Now it's interesting because the last week I've been in about 45 minutes away. I've had something going on there. I've popped into the Whole Foods there, and they don't put sugar in their foods. So, yeah, I guess that they make that decision store by store. But I wanted to come back to this idea that before I was under chiropractic care, I would be sick for 14 days, all the time, anytime I got a cold, but I was constantly sick, I believe, because I was constantly suppressing my symptoms.
Right.
So now when I get sick, and I do still get sick, maybe once a year or once every other year, I'm sick for 2 or 3 days max. That's it. And I believe part of that is I'm using herbs, I'm using homeopathy, I'm allowing my body to express itself. I'm not trying to cut off the fever. I understand that that's how our body's going to heal. So, and I also want to share with you, my daughter, when she was young, she got her share of colds, not vaccinated. And then when she was 3, she was lying down on our sofa in the middle of the day, and she was sleeping. And it was weird because she was way past taking naps. I go over to her and I touch her face, and she's burning up. And I had a thermometer. I don't know why, because I hardly ever used it, but she was so hot that I felt like I needed to check it. And sure enough, she had 104.7. Like, she was burning up. She was drenched. And I have to say, in that moment, I was really fearful. Like, what do I do? Like, I had always relied on my intuition and really believed in just letting the fever run its course. But 104.7 was scary. And at that moment, I questioned everything. Like, should I have that? Even though I knew better, it's like I questioned everything. And I can understand where parents are, because you love this being more than anything in the whole world, and you want to do everything to protect them. So I understand the why. And what I did was I adjusted her, and I called a friend of mine who has been learning homeopathy on her own. She was like in a self-study course. I think she was in year 2 or 3. And she came over, and so I adjusted my daughter, and within an hour, her fever dropped to about 100. Like, it really, like, that quickly. And was it the adjustment, or was it her body just expressing itself? But my friend came over, and I don't remember which remedy, but she looked at it from a classical viewpoint. And she came up with 3 remedies, and which one feels best for you? And I'm like, using my intuition, we used it. By that night, she had no fever. She was
That's great.
totally fine. And within a couple of hours, she was, happy and playful again, even though the fever was still working itself out.
Interesting. Yeah, that's great. It's great. You used all those supportive methods to move her through it.
Yeah. But again, I guess I want to just say that I understand where parents are coming from, because I do understand that it's scary. And, sometimes we question ourselves. Like, I had been a chiropractor at that point for, 15 years, and worked with dozens, hundreds of kids, for these same issues with success. But I guess it's different when it's your own.
Yeah, and what we need is support. People need support, and that's where I believe the current medical system has failed. It no longer gives support. It hands you a prescription, and then you can't get back to that individual without going through a whole lot of phone messages. And do you know what I mean? It's a challenge to try to get a human being on the phone, let alone an answer. And they're also concerned about litigation and not giving you advice unless you come in and pay for an appointment. It's just a system that is so broken. And what I've found in many of my colleagues is that our practices are booming right now because people want something different, and they're willing to explore and reach out and get something different.
So for people that are watching or listening to this, can you please just share, what does homeopathy do? And I would love it if this may be asking a lot. If you could just give a brief history of, where it came from, how it was used, and I would also love, again, maybe this is for another interview, just to talk about what happened in this country, because homeopathy, as I understand it, was one of the leading, tools that doctors had all over the country. We had hospitals here in Philly. We had Hahnemann Hospital that was named after the founder. And, again, maybe that's a lot for today to
Yeah,
cover, but, do the best you can. Okay.
sure. It's a lot, but let me see if I can do it in an organized manner. And then also I'll mention, I have an article in the Weston A. Price Journal, Wise Traditions. And I can actually send you a copy that you can link in the show notes. Can you do that?
Yes.
I'll send you a copy so then people have that also, because I talk about homeopathy and epidemics because it was very well used. So homeopathy is a full system of medicine, and it was discovered, devised by Samuel Hahnemann back in the 1700s. And he was disgruntled with the way medicine was hurting people. They were using, mercury, or they were using arsenic or bloodletting, or these different barbaric methods that were hurting as much as helping. And he was also a linguist. He spoke 7 languages, I believe. So he was frequently hired to translate old medical texts into different languages. And he saw that Hippocrates would use like to treat like. So Hippocrates, the father of medicine, would see somebody having a seizure, give a plant, henbane, which is called hyoscyamus, which can cause seizures, and he'd give that to the patient, and they would either be cured of seizures or they would die because it's too much. It's too powerful. So he decided to reduce the content and make it as little as possible. And he did this by looking at uh, different medicines, but he would observe people that were taking different things and the symptoms they would have. For instance, if they took too much arsenic, they would have vomiting, diarrhea, cold sweats, they'd be anxious. So he would, recognize all these different symptoms. And then he would utilize people and give them very, very small amounts of different natural things, plants or minerals, and notate what their symptoms were. So ultimately, what was determined was called materia medica. So it's what we use to look up a particular remedy to determine what can it cure. And we know that what it can cause in high potency, it can cure in very low potency. So by low potency, I mean, you start with the original source material, you dilute it, and 1 to 100 of a solution, and you have what's called a 1C solution. C is Roman numeral for 100. And then you take that, one part of that, and put it in 99 to 100 drops. And now you have a 2C. You take a drop of that, put it into 99 drops, you have a 3C. You repeatedly do this, and this is done in homeopathic pharmacies that have to pass stringent requirements, so it's all overseen. Once you get to 12C, Nancy, there are no molecules of that original substance. Now it's information. You have nanoparticles. It's become a frequency, it's become information, you can call it many different things, but there are no discernible molecules anymore after 12C. So we use 200C, 30C, we use many things above 12C, so people are not getting anything material. It's nanoparticles, it's energetic, it's information. When you give the body specific information, it acts as hormesis, and hormesis is an impulse that stresses the body just enough to cause a response. So let's say we do this in life. Let's say you have a deadline for a project. That's enough stress to make you do that project by that deadline, right? So that's hormesis. That's a form of hormesis. Doing it biochemically with the body is giving something that's just information, no real molecules of the substance, stresses the body just enough that the body starts to come back to its natural immunity. So this was used in Europe extensively. Actually, I can't quote the year off the top of my head, but it was used during a scarlet fever outbreak because Hahnemann found that giving a homeopathic remedy during the scarlet fever outbreak prevented people from having it exactly as if they'd already had the disease. So he was toying with the concept of innate immunity at that point. And some of the leaders in Prussia at that time, Germany, made it a rule that when there was an outbreak of what's the disease I just said?
Scarlet fever.
Scarlet fever, thank you. They had to take it. And the homeopathic remedy was belladonna, but it was homeopathically prepared, so there was no molecules of actual belladonna because that's a poisonous plant. And people prevented scarlet fever with belladonna. So that was historically a very successful application of homeopathy. It did come to the United States, and all of this is in the article. I'm going to give you the link. It came to the US. Hospitals were created, epidemics were addressed, lots of positive action took place. And then something happened called a Flexner Report. And the Flexner Report was something that was engaged by Rockefeller to evaluate the hospitals because he was into oil refinery and medications were made with crude oil and they were a big seller. And this Flexner Report went into these hospitals and determined that if they're not doing surgery, they can't be qualified as a hospital. Take out chiropractic, take out homeopathy, take out herbal medicine, and we want our people on the boards of these hospitals. In order to get funding, our people need to be on the board, and those people were pharma industry individuals. So now all medical schools were based on pharma prescriptions. So they, would diagnose an illness and determine what pharmacological application you needed. And that's what they learned still today. And they, not only was that the AMA was formed during that time, and the AMA made it a rule that you could not practice homeopathy or chiropractic and you could not associate with a homeopath. So we were completely verboten at that point. And the AMA, I know that the chiropractic profession sued the AMA. Yeah.
We did, and we won for $1.4 million, which is really nothing when you think about all the money that they've made and all the damages that happened. But yeah, I mean, we were considered quacks, right? That's where the name quackery came from, was they created this division of quackery to go after homeopaths and chiropractors,
Right.
right? Because we weren't following the medical model.
Right.
We
Of
weren't
prescribing a drug.
of prescribing drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, and it's really criminal. It's
It's
really
criminal because
criminal what
of
they did.
the far-reaching influence. It's one thing to have it awarded in court that they were wrong, they have to pay. That's one thing. That's a small thing. The bigger thing is the public presentation, because I remember when I was a child in the 60s and my aunt was seeing a chiropractor, and the entire family, their attitude was like, oh, that's just Madeline. She's just a nut. That was the prevailing attitude about chiropractic. Think of how pervasive that is and pernicious that is. So,
Well, I do want to interject something that I had started out as a pre-med major. And about a year and a half into my pre-med training, I had gone and spent some time with doctors. A cousin of my father's was the head of oncology at one of the major hospitals here. And I just remember like thinking, I don't want to go into medicine. Like, I don't want to deal with all this yucky fluids and see my hands in different parts of people's bodies. And I was really realizing it was not the field for me. And I happened to go on a break, vacation up to Vermont, and I went to a chiropractor's office and I was like, oh, this is for me. Like, I was so excited. I felt like I found my calling. And then when I came home to tell my family, they're like, oh, you don't want to become a quack, do you?
right,
And, I
right.
didn't. So I was like 19. I actually didn't start chiropractic school till the age of 30. Like, it's amazing. I finally found
Yeah,
my way back there. But
that was the
again, it was,
influence on
yeah,
you, the family judging that so harshly. Yeah,
yeah. And the funny thing is eventually it was my dad who said when I was about 29, I was preparing to go into physical therapy. I was working for a physical therapist and he'd been going to a chiropractor. And he said, Nancy, I really think chiropractic would be the best field for you because, I know you want to help people. And, at that point, I was a competitive tennis player. Like, he knew that I like to do something physical and not just sit,
right.
at a desk. And so it was my dad who actually said, you should check it out. And
Interesting.
the other thing that was this really is kind of like neither here nor there, but when I was around the same time when I was 19 or 20, I had gone through this career counseling because I was just lost. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And they did all this, IQ testing and preferences, and it came out as a woman, I should be like in retail, which is weird because like, ugh,
Right,
like it's something I just could never see myself doing. It's just, I may like to shop, but I didn't see myself being in sales or management. And when I when my dad had suggested this, I pulled out that form that I still had, the report, and said if I were a male, chiropractic was actually the top profession for me
as a male. And
as a
this is
male.
interesting because have you seen the shift happen? Now it's mostly females that are in chiropractic schools. I have one near me where I live. And the other interesting shift, Nancy, is the specialization with chiropractors. They go into neurology, they go
Right.
into functional medicine. So
Sports medicine,
yeah, they
pediatric.
specialize.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's so great because these are the people that are giving hands-on care and support in a way that's like old medicine that's necessary.
And the other thing, I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but my first experience with homeopathy was while I was in chiropractic school. One of my professors was also a classical homeopath. So he would teach part-time, and then in his practice, half of his patients were there for homeopathy and the other half were for chiropractic. I had had problems with IBS for 10 years. And I mentioned to him one day after class, I'm like, do you think you could help me? Like, I was so desperate. I tried, medicine, of course, all they do is they want to do all this invasive testing and then they have no answers for you. And he goes, sure, come on in. And, I spent an hour and a half, 2 hours. He did this whole long, intake,
Intake.
and he prescribed lycopodium. And, and I understand that what worked for me may not work for somebody else. And that's why in a minute, I'd like you to explain that a little bit more. I happened to get lucky. The first time I took that, my symptoms were gone. I was dating a guy who was taking me to Paris in a few weeks, and all I could think about was, what am I going to eat? I love butter. I love cheese. I can't eat any of this without knowing that there's a bathroom nearby. And I ate whatever I wanted. I was totally fine.
Wow. That's great.
So, that was my very first experience, and that was, 1991. And that's why I'm such a big fan of it.
Yeah.
So maybe you can explain a little bit like what a typical intake would look like.
Yeah. So a typical intake, we need to understand what's the central disturbance. So we might have 10 people with IBS, and they're going to get 10 completely different remedies because the central disturbance is really, what is your psyche telling you that your body is responding in this way? And the way we find that is to really, really understand the individual. I have to know, when did it start? What was happening in your life when it started? What makes you mad? What makes you happy? What are your preferences? What kind of weather do you like? What kind of foods do you prefer? What kind of foods do you hate? What everything about you. And people find that gratifying because they want to be understood. Everyone wants to be seen and understood. And by doing so, I know what medicine to match to that person that would cause all of those symptoms. So let's say that you said, around 4 o'clock in the afternoon is when it was worse for you. Or you said it started when a bully at school pushed you down and you got hurt. Or, I'm just pulling these things out of the air, but I would know that, lycopodium is the medicine that would cause you to be embarrassed and shamed. It would cause you to have a 4 o'clock aggravation. It would if you took it in a material dose. It's a plant, it's a moss, club moss. So the intake is understanding the person completely. Then we do an analysis where we have to sit down and find, okay, what medicine covers all of these different aspects of the individual. Then we give it, and sometimes only one dose is needed. That's the amazing thing about homeopathy. This is not a dependency relationship. You're not going to be taking this every day for the rest of your life. You
Nope.
might have periods where you have to retake it, and then I send it to the person, I give them their instructions and say, follow up in a month. So they follow up. And here's where it's unique, because many people are so used to that medical model of you take a pill and something stops, that they'll come back in a month and they'll say, let's say it's headaches. They'll say, oh, I still have headaches. Nothing happened. And I'll say, okay, do you still have them? And I look at the notes from the intake. Do you still have them 5 days a week? Well, no, maybe twice a week. Are they still lasting 6 hours? Well, maybe just a couple hours. Okay, this is the immune system's natural way of healing you. So you're slowly going to get better. You might take a step back 1 week, but this is the process, and it requires me understanding the process and then telling you, okay, I want you to redose just one more time, or just wait, or, whatever the instruction is.
Yeah, and just to make your point, so when I first took it, I had the remedy, and I took it with me to Paris, and I was fine for a couple weeks, and then all of a sudden I started just to feel like a little tightness, crampiness in my lower abdominal area. So I took another one, and what happened was probably by the end of the year, I was able to spread it out longer and longer.
Right.
I didn't take it unless I started to have a symptom,
Yeah.
right? I didn't just take it, once a week or once a
Preemptively.
day. Yeah,
Yeah.
preemptive. I never did that. So I just remember walking around with that for a long time, just because when I had a problem, it's like,
Yeah,
instant, like it's
urgent.
bad,
Yeah.
urgent. Yeah. So I don't remember how long it was where I like finally ditched the remedy.
Right.
Like I
So
didn't
let me
have to carry
interject,
around. Yeah.
because what you did was my ideal client. What you did was you applied your intuition
Right.
and you said to yourself, oh, I think I'm needing it because symptoms are coming up, and you took one dose and then you stopped, and then eventually you forgot about it because it was like, I'm not even thinking about this. So the problem ensues when people take the medical model and they apply it to homeopathy, and they're calling me every day wanting exact directions for what they need to do. And I try to teach people that your health is also based on your intuition. You have to be in touch with your body and ask, do I need this or do I not need this? And that's okay. And I'll hold your hand through that to help you learn it and do it better. But it's a big part of healing. And let me share my screen again, because there's another, hang on, let me find it and pull it up first, because I want to show you something else.
Well,
This
and
is,
I want to contrast that a little more with the medical model, which is, let's say a doctor's a gastrointestinal doctor, right? He's a specialist. And more than likely, I'm not saying all GI doctors are going to do this, but more than likely, he's going to say, okay, you got XYZ symptoms, here's the drug. And you're going to take that, however many times he wants you to take it. But he's probably prescribing the same drug to each person.
absolutely,
And so it's more of a one size fits all rather
completely.
than looking at you as an individual, body, mind, and spirit, right? He's not, a homeopath is just going to say here, and that's why the intake is an hour and a half or 2 hours, because you want to know, like, do you prefer warm foods over cold foods?
Right.
Do you prefer salt over sweet? Like, you're looking at all the things that make this person who they are, rather
Unique.
than taking okay, here you're having this symptom, we're going to treat that
Right.
symptom with a
Right.
drug. And I not to like just lay hard into the medical model, but part of that issue is they have these specialists that aren't looking at the whole body, unlike an internist or a general practitioner who may know that, oh, you're having problems at home, like you're having family issues, or
Right.
what else
Right.
is
It's
going
part of the
on.
picture.
It's
It's
part of
part
the
of the
picture.
picture,
So,
because
and
our
that's,
psyche, yeah, controls our health.
yeah.
And let me just share this one thing quickly, and then I'll go back. So this is the path of healing. And
Mm,
people think it's a straight line. This is what's
right.
expected. Not so. We take a lot of detours along the path of healing, and you have to be able to accept that. And what it comes back to is your own sovereignty, your own ability to get in touch with your intuition, to find the people that you need to support you, that get you and care for you and can support you. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to that, but you'll eventually get here, but it's not going to be a straight course.
Right. I love that. I love that because I even see that in chiropractic, right? So I have someone coming into me with a year's worth of shoulder problems, like her one shoulder, spinning issues. She's tried chiropractic, she's tried massage. I'm actually doing a combination of myofascial release, chiropractic, and I also believe that stress is a huge issue for her. So I'm doing some energy healing and some cranial work, and she's been to me 4 times now, and she leaves here with better range of motion, less pain, and then she comes back and oh well, I don't feel quite as good as I did when I left. I'm like, well, let's see your range of motion. Her range of motion is better, the pain level is far better, and so after 4 or 5 weeks she has almost full range of motion, and
Right.
she gets it. Like I said to her, she's coming to me once a week. I'm like, you're going to maybe take 3 steps forward, but that made me take a step back. And
Yeah.
my goal is to get you to the point where you're not
Yeah.
taking a step back. But again, it's understanding the stress in her life, and
Right.
how is that fitting into this whole
Right.
thing for you?
Well, you're a good chiropractor, Nancy, because you're doing, you're adding in those other things as opposed to just an adjustment, 10 minutes out the door. And this is why people appreciate homeopathy as well, because they feel seen, they feel heard, and you're really, offering them much more than just a pill. And it works. It works.
It,
I mean, I came to chiropractic because my kids were cured of asthma, migraines, kidney reflux. And in my late 40s, I went back to school for 4 years for homeopathy because I saw that this is amazing. I never looked back after I went to school.
and I would suggest to anybody who's watching today or listening to, if you're taking medications, go online and look at the potential side effects, because I think it's really important to understand that maybe you're getting some relief, but what other harm is being caused? And, one of my best examples of that was I had practiced for a short time in New Mexico, and a nurse came to see me. She was in her 50s. I think she came to me for back pain. Like I don't even remember what the exact situation was, but one thing that stuck out to me was she's in her mid 50s. She's on 16 medications, and
Ooh,
she's a nurse. And the first thing I asked her was, "What was the first medication that you took? What was the first one?" And it turns out it was the statin drug, which she was still on. So I said, okay, let's look up statin drugs. Well, we look it up, and sure enough, the side effects were blah, 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 blah. She was on meds for like 4 of those, so the statin drug caused these other problems.
right,
I mean, she got it. Like, it was like a light bulb had gone off, or the sun rose for the first time. Like,
right,
she instantly understood that she was creating this cascade of symptoms because she was covering up the symptoms rather than treating the problem. And in her case, we know, you and I both know, that cholesterol isn't a problem. In fact, we have a lot of it in our brain and in every cell. And when our liver's making it, it's because it's meeting the need of the body, just like if our body produces a fever to combat an infection. So, she went off that statin drug like immediately, and within months she was pretty much off of everything. But she was down to 3 or 4 drugs that
wow,
she only took as an on an ad needed basis. That was it. And by the way, I did not work with her. That's outside my scope of practice. She worked with her doctor to help her get her off those meds. But,
right.
huge difference in, as I said, I'm a big fan of homeopathy, and I just want more people to understand that it's safe and it can actually help your body heal rather than continuing to treat the symptoms.
Right. Right. And creating more symptoms by doing drugs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. That's great.
So, how can people find you?
My site is realimmunity.org, O-R-G.
Great.
And I have 2 other homeopaths working with me. We all offer free 15-minute consults so they can meet us, see if there's a fit. You just schedule a free 15-minute consult, and happy to do that. And then ask questions about your particular situation. So I'm on
Well,
Facebook as well, and I have films. You'll get a free. The films are on Gaia. I have 3 feature-length films about real immunity, and the first segment, 20 minutes of the first film, is free to anybody who comes to the site. So you can see the first film and get some information. Also, if you sign up for my newsletter, tons of free material. Just you
yep.
can pick and choose what you want.
I am on your newsletter and grateful for you. Thank you so much, Cilla. As always, it was great talking to you.
Thanks, Nancy, for having me.